Hi, my name's Lee Kirkpatrick, and I'm an incident lead with the Sophos Wrapup response team. And in today's video, I'm going to be running you through a query that we've discussed in one of the previous presentations as part of this series. Specifically, we're going to execute the 4624, 4625 login events query. Now, as I've previously discussed, a 4624 is a successful login and a 4625 is a failed login. And this can be really useful and beneficial in identifying one, successful RDP logins. You would see a 4624 with what's called a logon type of 10, but it can also help you evaluate and identify if there's any failed RDP logins potentially taking place as well. If you remember in a previous video, we've discussed what was called network level authentication, or NLA, which means that the actual authentication prior to the RDP session being established takes place over the network first. So this can be really useful in identifying potential devices that have RDP exposed, but maybe there hasn't been a successful login yet. And this can be a really nice way of identifying if any of your devices in the environment are potentially exposing RDP and there's a brute force attack currently taking place. So in order to execute this query, you want to take the OS query code from the GitHub page, navigate over to Sophos Central, select Threat Analysis Center, and go to Live Discover. On the top left is the designer mode. Toggle this button, and that will then show us a new button called Create New Query, which will actually allow us to execute the custom OS query code that we've just copied from GitHub. If we scroll down, there's a SQL text box where we can paste that SQL code. And if we scroll down, we can then select the devices we want to execute this query against. Now, this is a query that only works against Windows operating systems. So you'll want to deselect Mac OS and Linux and then click Apply. Then what you can do is select the devices you'd want to execute this query against. Now, typically what we do as part of our initial investigation is execute this across everything because we want to get an understanding of exactly where these successful and failed logins are taking place. Once you're happy with your device selection, you can click the Update Selected Devices list, and you'll see that we have 2 endpoints selected here. Once we're happy, we can execute the query by clicking Run Query. It's going to prompt us and say, do you want to run this untested query? And we'll say yes. But what you'll do is you'll get an additional error that maybe you're not aware of. And in this instance, it says undefined variables, and that we have to define the variables username and source IP. And that's because if we go back up to the query, there's actually a section here where we denote 2 variables, and that is by the 2 dollar symbols that you can see here. Anything that has $, text, $, is a variable within OS query. So what we can do is expand the variable editor here, add 2 variables, one being username, which is what the error stated, and one being source IP. Both of these are going to be type string. And in this instance, we're not focusing on a specific username, so we can use a wildcard character, which means any username. And subsequently, we're not looking for any particular source IP at present, so we can use a wildcard and say, I want to search for any IP address. Now, when we execute this query, that will get rid of that error regarding the variables, and this query will successfully execute. Now, this query will take some time to return, and that depends again on a number of different factors, the resources of the machines, the network connection speeds of those machines, also how large the security event log is. That can have an impact on how quickly this query takes as well, because a lot of the times the security event logs contain quite a number of events. But what you're doing is you're waiting for the status column to say that this query has finished, and then you can start browsing and looking at the results. Now, this query may actually return quite a lot of information. So what might be easier for you is exporting this here out to a CSV and opening this in something like Microsoft Excel. For this demo, I'll just continue to use the web UI, however. Now, again, the most important columns here are going to be endpoint name. So where are these successful or failed logins actually taking place on? Also the date and time. So when are these actual successful or failed logins taking place? And what can be quite useful is actually clicking on this column header here to sort either by ascending or descending, so we can see the furthest events or the closest events to the current time. Now, if we sort descending in this instance, we can also see that there's a lot of 4625s. And if you're not familiar with what that is, there's a little description and it tells you it's a failed login. Now, of course, this is from the security event log like we previously discussed. The username column is going to show us the failed logins that were taking place for that specific user. So in this instance, there's a lot of administrators, but some very random usernames here as well, such as reception EI, Nukovova. So quite a number of various different failed usernames here that are attempting to log on. What's also really interesting is the source machine network. Now, what this shows us is the actual host name of the device that's attempting, or if it was a 464, that actually managed to successfully connect. Now, this can be really, really beneficial because if it's not a host name that you recognize, that could raise suspicion and is something that you want to investigate. It could mean that you're under attack potentially, so definitely something that you want to investigate if you don't recognize what these source machine networks are. Because most organizations are going to have a naming convention for devices. And if you see source machine networks that differ from what you would typically expect, definitely something you want to investigate. Also, what we can see here is the source IP address. In this instance, they are all remote IP addresses. So they're non-RFC 1918 IP addresses. So these are going to be external IPs in this instance, which means someone is failing to log in to our two devices in the environment from external IP addresses, and the login type is 3. Now, again, this is something that you typically associate with network-based logons, so something like SNB, and it could be that you unfortunately have SNB exposed, and we do see that in some organizations. But in this instance, this is because we have RDP exposed, and because of that network level authentication, we're seeing a 4625 failed login event with a logon type 3, which indicates a logon over the network. So this query can be really useful in identifying devices that maybe have RDP or something exposed to the internet that shouldn't. I hope this video has been very useful for you. Thank you very much for your time, and catch you on the next video.